A guerra cibernética já começou. É o alerta de Richard Clarke, autor do melhor estudo sobre o assunto, que levou o presidente Obama a criar, em Washington, o Comando Cibernético, para defender os Estados Unidos contra ataques através da internet. Potências rivais como China e Rússia já teriam colocado, na rede dos Estados Unidos, bombas lógicas, programas prontos para serem ativados e capazes de destruir partes da infraestrutura do país. Num exemplo recente de guerra cibernética, o vírus Stuxnet danificou centrifugadoras do programa nuclear do Irã, e as suspeitas recaem sobre Estados Unidos e Israel. Richard Clarke era o responsável pelo combate ao terrorismo na Casa Branca, quando aconteceram os atentados de 11 de setembro. Depois passou a cuidar do terrorismo cibernético e deixou o governo por discordar do presidente George W. Bush. Ele falou ao Milênio em sua consultoria de segurança em Arlington, perto da capital americana.
You have apologized to the 9/11 families, and you said you personally had failed them. But as the head of counterterrorism at the White House, you have warned that this was going to happen, that the attack was coming. So you were for the Bush administration what Cassandra was for the Trojans.
I apologize because I think I did fail. Others failed as well. And I'll leave it for history to figure out where to assign the blame and appropriate amounts of failure. But I thought it was important for the families of the victims to hear an apology. And no one had done it. And time had gone on, and the president hadn't said it. No one in the Congress had said it. And I was out of government at the time, so I was speaking for myself.
Yeah, it was 3 years later.
Yeah, I was speaking for myself. And what is surprising to me is even after I said it, no one else did. They're unwilling to say that they made any mistakes. And even in Bush's new book, which glosses over so much, he never says that he made mistakes or that this could have been avoided. And the fact is that we did warn them that something was coming. We didn't know exactly when or exactly where. But they ignored the entire issue of terrorism and the threat from bin Laden and the threat from al-Qaeda for 9 months. And I think that's a little hard to explain.
For a year and a half, more than 60 people in the CIA knew that there were two men in the U.S. territory who turned out to be part of the 9/11 terrorists. And there were many other signs. Is this something that could lead one to think, well, maybe there was a decision to let that happen?
Yeah, no decision was made to let it happen. But I think both the 9/11 Commission and the Joint Congressional Inquiry both raised questions about why CIA knew that there were two al-Qaeda people in the country and didn't tell me, didn't tell the White House, didn't tell the FBI until a few weeks before 9/11. And both investigations really didn't answer the question, why did CIA fail to tell anybody? So I think there is an unanswered and important question 10 years later, which still, I think, needs to be answered. Who in the CIA decided not to tell anyone, and why did they make that decision? And if 60 people in CIA had that information, this is not a mistake. It's not an oversight. It's an intentional decision that would had to have been made at a very high level.
What do you think happened?
I don't know. I think it's at least possible that CIA, in cooperation with the Saudi intelligence service, perhaps hoped that they could convert these two people into double agents, and may have been trying to do that. And I think they feared, potentially, that if they told me, or they told the FBI, that there were these al-Qaeda guys in the United States, that we would have had them arrested. And then the opportunity to convert them to double agents would have gone away. That's just a theory, and I don't know that. is the case. All I know is that 60 people in CIA knew about it. These guys were in the country for over a year. CIA told me everything else, every last detail. The director of CIA would call me on the telephone almost daily. And yet that piece of information didn't get to me or the FBI. So something needs to be explained.
Maybe they were already double agents?
I don't think so.
No. How has 9/11 affected you personally, emotionally?
Well, I think on the day of 9/11, I tried very hard to shut off my emotions and just do the job, because there would have been an enormous amount of anger. Anger at my own government, and anger at my president. And there was no room for that, no place for that on 9/11 or in the days immediately thereafter. We just had to do the job. But the more time went on, the angrier I got. And then when I realized that they were going to try to use this as a justification for invading a country, Iraq, that had nothing to do with 9/11, I got very angry. Because I knew, and I think everybody should have known, that invading Iraq was going to result in thousands of deaths. And it did. It resulted in more Americans getting killed than on 9/11. It resulted in 100,000 or more Iraqis getting killed, most of them innocent people, and millions of innocent Iraqis being made refugees in their own country and having to leave their own country. They really let loose the dogs of war and justified it on the basis of 9/11. They were manipulating the emotions of the American people, and that made me extremely angry. And I quit the government after 30 years in the government and started campaigning against President Bush and his policies.
And the Bush administration tried to destroy your reputation. How has that affected you?
Well, I knew they would. That's the way they operated. They didn't get very far. You know, after all, they were a Republican administration. I was a civil servant. I worked for Republican presidents. I worked for Democratic presidents. But the point was I had worked for Republican presidents in the White House, in the Pentagon, in the State Department, Bush's father. I had lots of Republican friends in the Congress. So they didn't get very far trying to blame me.
As part of your job at the White House, you became involved in counter-cyber terrorism and cyber war. And that became your main interest. Is cyber war a bigger threat than run-of-the-mill terrorism like Al-Qaeda and stuff like that?
Well, it depends on your scope. So there's cyber crime is a new phenomenon since we started working on this. And that's a multi-billion-dollar threat to banks and to average citizens every year. There's also cyber spying, cyber espionage, where people are stealing information from other companies. So they're stealing intellectual property, engineering designs, chemical formulas. And this is a real risk for economic competitiveness. And I think it's a very serious problem. Then there's cyber war, where nation states can go after each other and turn off the electric power or whatever. That hasn't happened very much. And it's not going to happen until countries are going to go to war anyway. If a country is going to go to war now and in the future, it will use cyber attacks as well as regular attacks. But cyber war is only going to happen as often as war happens.
Yeah, but you wrote in your book that cyber war has already begun because preparation for it has begun.
Well, I think that's right. So in order to carry out a cyber attack, to cause trains to stop moving, water to stop being pumped, pipelines to explode, electric power to go off, in order to do that when you want to do it, you already have to have penetrated the networks. You can't start, you can't have the president tell you, I want to do this, and start that day to try to figure out how to do it. So nations are already penetrating each other's networks and putting in back doors into the networks so that they can get in quickly when they want to.
Recently it was revealed that in April this year, China hijacked a large chunk of the internet traffic. What does that mean? And why was that not very much in the news here?
Well, it points to how vulnerable the design of the internet is. It's based on trust. And so when one...
It was made for scientists.
It was made for scientists who all trust each other and researchers. And then it started growing and they never changed it. So it's still based to a very large extent on trust. So if you're sending a message from Brazil to the United States, your internet service provider in Brazil needs to know where I am, how to get in touch with me. And so they advertise. They have lists that they say, I send traffic to the United States. I send traffic to Washington, D.C. And therefore, the messages automatically go there. What happened in April was the Chinese telecom company began advertising, I take traffic from these addresses. Well, these addresses were all American addresses. So a very large amount of U.S. traffic, including government traffic, including Congress and the Pentagon traffic, went across the Pacific into China and then back before it reached its ultimate destination. I think that was an experiment on the part of the Chinese.
A demonstration?
A demonstration that they could do it, an experiment to see if they could do it. They could have copied it all if they wanted to, or they could have just stopped it. And I think it shows they, or anybody else, frankly, who can get into this traffic system, and it's not that hard, can either misdirect large amounts of traffic or just kill it.
Is there proof that China has planted logic bombs in the U.S. infrastructure? What is a logic bomb and how can that be used?
So a logic bomb is essentially, I think, the same as a backdoor. When you try to get into a network you're not supposed to be in, that takes a lot of sophistication sometimes, and it may take a lot of time. But once you're in that network, you can now create an easy way for you to get back in. You create an account with your name, you set up a password, you set up a way that only you know that you can get back in. That's a backdoor. A logic bomb is when, in addition to doing that, you leave behind some software that could do destruction. And so when you need to get back in, you don't have to insert that destructive software. It's already there. So all you have to do is send a very small ping message.
What cyber attacks have been done by the U.S.? Of course it's classified, it's secret, but what has been done?
Well, it's hard to know what...
It's classified, obviously.
It's hard to know what the United States has done or if somebody else has done it. We read in the newspapers that somebody has attacked the Iranian nuclear program with a
Stuxnet?
Stuxnet